Coming up, Navajo citizen Ginger Sykes Torres has withdrawn her candidacy for U.S. Congress. She tells us why. And we have stories from the Mother House of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. Plus, the U.S. Supreme Court revisits the McGirt decision. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Ku'watsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. A conference in Canada last week explored a powerful idea, that is that Indigenous communities are essential for the planet to reach net zero by 2030. The road to net zero means there are no added greenhouse gases by 2030. At the Vancouver conference, several Native leaders talked about how Indigenous people must be early partners in these developments. Chief Charlene Gale is the chair of the First Nations Major Project Coalition. She's also the leader of her own nation in Fort Nelson. Her major project is the Tutica geothermal plant.
We had this pipeline that ran through our community that gave us royalties, and it really brought a lot of prosperity where we were able to invest that money and do a lot of things for our people. And since then, that well has been depleted. And so the interesting part of this geothermal project is there was a lot of work through oil and gas to get us through stage one.
The plant is a repurposed gas field, and it was constructed with a $40 million grant. The power will provide all of the energy for tribal citizens' homes, with additional energy being added to the provincial grid. Well, a new course on the Indigenous history of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is confronting the school's complicated history. Now in its third semester, the class is part of an effort to expand commitment to the Indigenous community at MIT. Teaching the class is a Lumbee citizen and the school's distinguished fellow in Native American Studies, David Lowery. He says the class has looked at some of the hard truths of how MIT intersects with the oppression of Native people.
MIT began as the business of erasing Indigenous peoples. So from 1862 with the Morrill Act, which literally was the seed money for MIT through the genocide of Native peoples, until today, MIT has taken advantage of the disappearance of Native people and literally built businesses and the eradication of Indigenous people.
The class has had an immediate impact. Students have begun to build a directory of alumni who are Native American. And Lowery says the class started a letter writing campaign that led to a meeting with members of the school's administration.
We ended up writing letters to the provost, basically reasserting requests that students in previous years had made to MIT. And then we ended up meeting with the provost, with the president. We had conversations like with the chancellor and other executives of MIT, basically helping them understand.
Lowery hopes students learn that it is okay to challenge aspects of colonial organizations. Last week in Las Vegas, Nevada, a California tribe became the first Indigenous nation to own and operate a casino in the gambling capital of the world. This effort is being made with Native values at the forefront. Stuart Huntington reports.
There was glitz, excitement, and a big rush to join a big party. But there was also a keen sense of the overall journey and the road ahead.
One of the top values that we have as tribal people is giving back to others, and that's regardless of location. Whether we're on or off the reservation, we're going to carry those values with us.
Last year, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians bought the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas for $650 million. The nearly 1,400-room complex remained closed since Nevada shuttered all resorts during the pandemic. The reopening was hailed as a milestone for Native American economic development.
It's absolutely phenomenal. We believe that, we've gone through so many struggles in our lifetime, in our prehistory, that at this time, it's time for us to move forward in the development of this nation.
Casas's great-great-grandfather, Santos Manuel, led fewer than 30 of his people to safety after California militia forces attacked in 1866. The band endured poverty for generations, but has since turned a one-room bingo hall in 1986 into a thriving, diversified economic engine built on Native values.
We benefited from the kind-heartedness of others when we had very little, and it built us into these kind-hearted, warm-hearted people that just want to give back.
In Las Vegas, that meant helping local nonprofits before and during reopening ceremonies, and remembering other Native communities.
We survived everything that came up against us, and we are still here today. And this proves it to every tribe that is capable of doing exactly what we do.
In Las Vegas, Stuart Huntington, ICT.
The first Native American U.S. Poet Laureate is celebrating the end of her third term at the Library of Congress. Joy Harjo was honored with a reading and dance party in Washington, D.C. The Muskogee Creek Citizen is an award-winning author whose art and advocacy crosses over into many genres. Legendary musician Jennifer Kreisberg spoke to ICT about the song that she composed and performed to honor her longtime friend.
I just wanted it to have a feeling, to make you feel something, kind of like how her poems and her work make you feel, right? And just to honor her as someone who loves her, and sisterhoodship and kinship.
The evening also included poetry from Harjo's protege, Portland Houghton Harjo. Reflecting on the event, Kreisberg highlighted what sets the writer apart.
That's what really spoke to me last night when I was sitting there, was that she really didn't go alone and didn't go, I finally made it to the top and I'm going to stay up here alone. She brought everybody.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, national correspondent Marionette Pember shares a deeply personal story of her mother, plus court cases and congressional campaigns. Stay with us. There has never been a Native person elected to Congress from Arizona. Navajo citizen Ginger Sykes Torres was hoping to change that, so she ran for one of Arizona's seats. Then, in a statement last week, Ginger's campaign said a lawsuit was filed contesting her candidacy. The county determined she did not have enough signatures to qualify for the ballot in November. Shortly after, Ginger officially withdrew from the race. Here's what she had to say.
This lawsuit has not been easy to deal with, and our decision to withdraw was agonizing. But I'm relying on the strength of my ancestors, my family, and friends, and supporters to get me through this tough time. My story is not over. Thank you all for your support.
And we're joined now by Ginger for more. Hi, Ginger. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So at a very high level, tell us about this lawsuit and what it ultimately meant for your congressional campaign.
Well, a lawsuit was filed contesting my candidacy, signaling me out from my Democratic opponents. The county determined that I did not have enough signatures, indeed, to qualify for the ballot this November, even though we submitted more than 1,000 signatures above the required amount. And we thought we had a plan to move forward, but it appears that there was no path that could be found. So I did have to make the agonizing decision to withdraw last week as a result of the challenge. And like I said on the video, the lawsuit has not been easy to deal with because we were so close to getting such momentum across the country for my candidacy within the Arizona's Congressional District 1 race. Through this time, it's been difficult, but I'm just so happy that I can be joined by my family, and my friends have come to rally around me. I had a fundraiser planned after I announced a formally planned fundraiser. And so I ended up going to Albuquerque and being surrounded by a lot of my college classmates, also former professional colleagues and family and friends there. So we had a very nice conversation about kind of lessons learned from my race in particular, but also what this means moving forward and how to keep moving forward. We know that Native Americans have been cast aside for decades in this country, and we fought through harder things. We fought through getting our culture stripped away during the boarding school era, and we were prevented from even voting in Arizona until the 1970s. And today we are still facing bills that are meant to suppress our right to vote here in Arizona. So I won't stop standing up for what is right and also paving the way for future generations. And with me getting pushed out of the race, it's at least another 2 years until Arizona has a chance to get a representative in our United States Congress of Native American heritage. So there's a lot to be done.
I'm wondering if you can talk to, the barriers for Native candidates specifically running for Congress. I mean, you're one example of someone who tried their best to make it on the ballot, right? And that didn't happen. So I'm wondering if you can at all talk about the barriers.
Yeah, I'll talk about the barriers in just a second, but I just want to say that growing Native political power, such as running for Congress, being in that seat, it won't solve all of the problems facing Indian country, but it will at least get us a seat at the table to advocate and educate fellow decision makers on Native American issues. And so the design of the United States political system was not built for Native people, but we are figuring it out one by one. And every lesson, every time we go through this process with another Native candidate, we know a little bit more about the process. And so we are going to pass that knowledge down to our future leaders in all of our communities. And there are a number of organizations that are out there that are working on this type of thing. One that comes to mind is Advanced Native Political Leaders, but there's a whole wide range of organizations that are working to not only get out the Native vote, but they know what it means to have people at the seat, Native Americans have a seat at the table. We know this from looking at Congresswoman Sharice Davids. We know this from Secretary Holland, who has now a seat at the table in Biden's congressional cabinet. And so with all of these steps, we are paving the way forward for more to come up and rise up. And so the challenges that I've noticed during my campaign are numerous. They range from the strategy, the sheer strategy used to undercut my candidacy, challenging signatures for the ballot. That's been used in the past on other Native congressional candidates running right here in Arizona. So it's not a new thing, but it is something that we need to get past that hurdle the next time. We also need to think about challenges that all candidates face that many Native candidates may not know about or be prepared for, such as the large fundraising goals. To run a congressional campaign in the district that I'm running in costs millions of dollars. And so that is a lot of time spent on the phones just doing fundraising. And so fundraising alone for a race like mine is a full-time job for a candidate. And there are very few people that are able to give up their full-time job to run for office, which is not a guaranteed paycheck if you don't happen to win the race. So another thing facing Native candidates is party politics. So simply who has worked the hardest within the party is kind of sometimes somebody that people see as the next leader, whether or not they're the best for the district or the best candidate in general. And so that's just something that we have to deal with and learn how to get involved in the party, have our voices be heard, and be seen as leaders within our own political parties in order to be elevated up also through the party. And so another big issue for me was PACs. And so Native Americans, we don't have a lot of representation at the federal level. And so we don't have that money there in widespread PACs that can support Native candidates. And so we rely on kind of our partner communities to help us through races, such as like the Hispanic caucus or Native congressional members and allies. And so we need to build our Native representation so that we have more money coming in specifically to Native candidates so we can help other Native candidates.
Ginger, we only have a short time left here, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to ask the big question. Will you run again for Congress?
So I am not closing any doors at this time. I don't feel my work is finished. But in the meantime, while I decide, I'm definitely going to use my experience running to help other candidates that are running in this cycle in particular. We need to get Sharice Davids back into office. She is facing a very tough congressional race. And so along with her and several others at various levels in government that are running across the country, I will dedicate my time to helping them rise up.
Well, Ginger, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in the case Oklahoma versus Castro-Huerta last week. It will ultimately decide Oklahoma's authority to prosecute some crimes on native lands. It challenges the 2020 McGirt decision, where the High Court ruled that Congress never disestablished the Creek Reservation, so the state of Oklahoma didn't have jurisdiction to prosecute. Tribes saw this decision as a huge win for sovereignty. So what is at stake now? ICT reporter and producer Colby Kickingwoman has been following the case. Hi, Colby. Great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. Hope you're doing well.
So it's a large task to ask, but summarize this U.S. Supreme Court case for us and tell us what's at stake here.
Oof, yeah, that is a large question to ask. The state of Oklahoma, in the 2 years since the McGirt decision has been decided, they've put in over 30 appeals petitions, and they were all denied except for this one. And in Castro-Huerta, the appeal was even restricted to a very limited scope, looking at the state's ability to prosecute non-natives when their victims are native in Indian country, as you said. And so, the state has been looking to have it repealed, but the McGirt decision will stand. It's just a matter of the state's ability to prosecute some of these cases.
So who are the major players in this lawsuit?
Well, Castro-Huerta is a non-native man who was convicted of a crime, and I believe was malnourishment of his 5-year-old stepdaughter, who was Eastern man of Cherokee. And so, yeah, it's obviously the state and then him and, tribes from all over Oklahoma and Native organizations coming to their support across the country.
I'm really curious. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court heard the oral arguments for this case. What exactly happened there?
Yeah, it was a long argument. It went over 2 hours. A lot of the arguments from the state surrounded repeated assertions that they made over the past couple of years that the sky is falling and cases and crimes are slipping through the cracks of prosecution. Counter to that, tribes would say that they've invested in hiring additional attorneys, crime victim advocates, investigators, judges. The Cherokee Nation alone has invested more than $30 million in their judicial system to meet their criminal justice responsibilities. The Muskogee Nation has increased its cross-deputization agreements with local municipalities, by a whole lot. I don't have the exact number on me, but the tribes are working very hard to meet what they're supposed to do.
And after the arguments, I'm really curious what the reaction has been from both sides in terms of, how they felt the cases were argued.
Yeah, so, during the case, Justice Gorsuch, who's kind of become the federal Indian law justice on of the nine, he grilled Oklahoma pretty hard, as did Justice Sotomayor. And I think the wild card here is going to be Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She wasn't on the Supreme Court when the McGirt decision was decided. Obviously, she replaced Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was, I believe, the fifth vote, or one of the 5 votes that got the McGirt decision passed 5-4. And so it seems that she might be the person it comes down to.
Yeah, and we'll all be watching very closely. And do we have any indication yet when a ruling could be decided?
Just by the end of the current term in June. So, they usually hand out decisions a couple times a week. Indian Country will also be looking at the Indian Child Welfare Act case that was heard earlier this year. And so there will be a couple real big decisions coming down here at the end.
And of course, we'll have all of the latest coverage at our website, indiancountrytoday.com. Colby, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
St. Mary's Indian Boarding School is a place tied with history to ICT's national correspondent Mary Annette Pember. The school once operated on the Bad River Ojibwe Reservation in Wisconsin, and it was the school that her mother attended. Mary Annette Pember shares this story.
I recently traveled to the mother house of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, the order of Catholic nuns who taught at St. Mary's Indian Boarding School on the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin, where my mother attended school in the 30s and 1940s. Located in La Crosse, Wisconsin, the order's sprawling buildings include a convent, living space and nursing home for sisters, office spaces, archives, museum, and chapel. All are connected by a series of underground tunnels. The sisters gave me a tour of their properties and magnificent chapel. This inlay is mother of pearl.
Mother of pearl, and this is all marble. The altars are marble. Carrara marble from Italy.
And you said you have no idea of the cost?
We have no idea the total cost of the chapel, which is quite a mystery.
St. Mary's School closed in 1969. But like many Catholic orders that operated Indian boarding schools, the sisters have embarked on a campaign to examine this work and create a truth and healing process for harm they committed against Indigenous peoples. The sisters are digitizing their boarding school archives and making them available to the Bad River tribe. So tell me a little bit about, what the order is doing regarding its history at the St. Mary's Indian Boarding School in Odana on the Bad River Reservation, which I understand is the only Indian boarding school that the sisters taught at. Is that correct?
That's correct. We administered it from 1883 to 1969. And right now, I would say we're in a big learning curve of what the history is. We're re-looking at the history.
I like to say there has been a lot of conversating. And wonders how long is this got to go on? I mean, how many, it sounds so vague and open-ended, and it doesn't really sound like, it's all this sort of internal stuff that's going on, framed in this fearfulness of not opening these institutions, not opening themselves up to possible, perhaps financial risk, that's really kind of what it seems to be to me, as a person looking in. So it doesn't seem to be moving very quickly. And that I think a lot of people find that really disappointing.
People who have been living their entire lives in this reality, their perspective is understandably different than people who are just saying after 2 years, wait a minute, there's a problem here? And you're right, it's been a long time in coming. Mary, this is particularly for you. This is personal, because the story of your mother and your grandmother, as you've shared it with the world, you've also shared it with me. I've prayed about your mom. I've prayed about your grandma. I've prayed about you. And I want you to know that I have heard the pain. I can't comprehend it, but I've heard it. I believe it, and as the president of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, I am sorry. I apologize for what those experiences and what our school has done in your family. I am sorry. And know that I will continue to pray, because I think that this conversation right now is part of a bigger picture that neither one of us knows, who's holding it.
We bless you in the name of the Lord.
Miigwech, thank you. The sisters' apology and blessings were unexpected, but represent an important first start towards healing. True reconciliation, however, demands action from all Catholic Indian boarding school entities. That action includes opening all church archives to survivors and their families. Surely, after all this time, Native peoples and all Americans deserve to know the truth. Mary Annette Pember in La Crosse, Wisconsin, for ICT.
We send a special thank you to Mary Annette Pember for that report. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.